What's up, gamers? Welcome back to 180 MTG. My name is Ryan Overturf, and this week I'm going to be talking about powered cubes, specifically my relationship regarding playing with power and why my enthusiasm for powered cubes versus non-powered cubes is at an all-time low, even though my love for cube is at an all-time high. But before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about Shoebox. And keep in mind, I generally record the podcast a few days before it goes live. Here, I'm recording a week ahead of time. I'm actually recording this the same day that I recorded the Razor Swine episode. So some time has passed. Keep that in mind. It can be a little bit weird talking about anything that's at all topical with these kind of delays in recording. So a week behind here, but Shoebox is coming up March 13th to the 15th at the St. Paul River Center. Check that out. You can order your tickets, get your badge for that, sign up for the Cube main event at shoebox.gg. I'm going to be there representing the podcast. Ask me for a sticker. Come talk to me. Come say hi. Let me know if you're enjoying the show. Let's talk cube. Let's draft. I think it's going to be a really fun weekend. And so I don't have any more recent updates regarding the state of the Twin Cities. It's still the case where, as of recording right now, we have not seen any kind of drawdown. They've announced the end of the occupation here, but it's not really something that we have seen the impacts of on the ground. There's still a lot of reports of ICE activity, so I'm hoping that things will be clearing up. Things will get easier on the day-to-day here. There is still a lot of need. Whether there's an immediate, if they were gone yesterday, there would still be a lot of need in Minnesota. So I'm going to keep posting that link for mutual aid, legal funds, food banks, rent relief. That stuff is all going to be really important to chip in where we can for a long time. And I'm encouraging everybody to come out to the Twin Cities for Shoebox, spend some money at local businesses. This occupation has been really hard on the local economy here, so coming out and supporting us in that way would be great. So come out to Shoebox. Again, that's March 13th to the 15th at the St. Paul River Center. Come play some Cube. Get your tickets at shoebox.gg, and I will see you there. And now for this week's topic, and I want to preface this by saying that this is really as subjective as a topic as I have tackled here on the podcast. I'm just talking about my relationship with powered cubes and my feelings about drafting them these days, and why my personal excitement has dwindled. I think a lot of people really do still love powered cube, and I don't share any of my feelings to disparage anybody or to say anybody's doing it wrong or the things that you like are bad. I'm just saying why I don't like them as much these days, why I'm less enthused to work on or draft even my own powered cube projects, and why my attention has been in other places. And I kind of ended up on this topic. My friend Jack, who has been a real sweetheart, recently moved back to Minnesota from the East Coast. He was asking me about my thoughts on the second run of the Arena Powered Cube. I did cover kind of my experience and my thoughts on the first run of the Arena Powered Cube, which debuted last year. The second run was something that happened in January. I only did a couple drafts of that one. I drafted it a lot less than the first run. And at the time of recording here, we're actually on the third run of Powered Cube, and I really was just not prepared for it to be released at this kind of clip so quickly, which does speak to the fact that it must be very successful if they're already running it back the third time. So again, I think that Powered Cube is something that is widely popular, and I am not saying that it is wrong to like it. A lot of people like it, and it is something that is very fun. For me, it's a lot less fun than sitting down and playing paper magic with some razor swines, and I'm going to get into my experience here. Those of you who have been following my work for a long time know that I used to write about all of the digital cubes and the updates thereof when I was writing about Cube Weekly for Star City Games. And something that I don't know that I've ever expressed publicly is that was by far the most stressful writing I ever did. And there's kind of multiple aspects of that. The timelines were weird, where I would get the cube list often within a day of my deadline, or I had to really figure out how to make things work on a really tight turnaround from getting the list and having an article live before the cube went live. But that really wasn't the biggest stressor. That kind of time crunch in a way that honestly that can be kind of motivating for me. What was stressful is I really didn't want to publish anything disparaging. I didn't want to dissuade anybody from playing these cubes. I wanted to encourage people to play them. But more than that, I really didn't want the curators of these environments to read my writing and take it as any kind of disparagement, any kind of judgment. I always was stressed out about somebody who went about some creative endeavor and was sharing their creative project with a wide audience, reading what I had to say about it and feeling hurt by something that I put out there. So that was something that I tried to be really reverent of in my writing. And there were cubes that I wrote about that I genuinely was not a huge fan of. I tried to make it so that didn't come out in my writing, though. It never felt like my place to say what I liked and what I didn't like. The whole idea for me to write about other people's cubes was to foster excitement for them and to build hype and get people interested and kind of offer insights about how I would go about drafting them, and not to say which ones I liked better or not, because really what I like doesn't really matter. Largely, those cube reviews for the digital cubes were a big part of just the content plan about putting something out weekly. And I do think that it is useful if you're in the creator space. I'm continuing to do cube review, set review style stuff here on the podcast because I do like having an assignment and something where you can look ahead to a week and just kind of take the pressure off of having an idea and rather just be able to look at your calendar and say, oh, Strixhaven is coming out. I can do a couple weeks about that, and that'll be topical. People will be interested in it, and I just have to read cards and say what I feel about them. That's a pretty easy week. But I am largely just not, I think, going to touch other people's projects on the show here. Maybe at some point I'll get into having guests on the podcast and allow people to speak for their own designs. But I don't really want to spend any time doing anything that could read as a critique of anybody else's creativity, certainly unless they signed on for that kind of thing. And so I don't really want to talk about a lot of the digital cubes, especially if there's something that I'm not really vibing with. And I've been playing way less of digital cube over the last year or so. The current run of the Arena Powered Cube, I don't know if I'm going to play it at all. I might fire off one or two. I don't think I said the reason that I'm recording this episode ahead of time. I'm planning at being at RC Milwaukee. That's going to be the weekend before this releases, but it's next weekend at the time of recording. And so any time I would spend playing Arena lately has been just playing Standard, getting ready for that event. So any time that I would use for digital cubing has very much been just playing Standard on Arena these days. So I don't know how much I'm going to experience this cube run, and I don't want to make myself play something, especially with something that I haven't been finding the most fun with lately. And to get into my relationship with Powered Cube, I'm going to take things even further back, kind of go to the origins of Cube. Cube originally was this play environment where the entire idea is you played with the most powerful cards in the history of Magic. That's the origin of Cube. Even early on, there was a division between powered and unpowered cubes. So in general, cubes were just a collection of powerful cards. It didn't take long for there to be more creative expressions and more unique environments. That's what really Cube has always been. The initial idea, though, was just the most powerful cards. And there was that division. Some people played with power, some people didn't. A lot of that was that just not that many people own power. So if you wanted to play Powered Cube, a smaller percentage of the play group had to own power. Only one person in the cube group would have to have it. But even then, that's way fewer than 1 in 8 Magic players have powered. And of course, you can proxy it, whatever, but I know that for me, I have a strong preference of playing with real cards. They look right, they feel right. I don't proxy for any of my cubes, which is, again, not to disparage anybody that does it. I like playing with real cards. But that also has nothing to do with why I'm not vibing with Powered Cube right now. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent on a tangent. Back to the origins of Cube. So Cube was just playing with the most powerful cards, and that's what the Holiday Cube was when it first was launched on Magic Online. The Holiday Cube was something that would release around the holiday season at the end of the year every year. Later would just be known as the Vintage Cube at Magic Online, which now has very regular offerings. Of course, it's not the Holiday Cube. It's up like every every month now. It's just available all the time. And it seems like the arena powered cube is going to be available all the time. But that is where the digital cube started. It was with the holiday powered cube every year. And that Magic Online having that powered cube is something that really helped establish Cube as one of the more popular ways to play Magic. And the Magic Online Vintage Cube, the Holiday Cube, has always been a little rough around the edges, and I personally believe it's inherently fraught to include power in a cube where such a large percentage of the cube goes undrafted. Having a 540 card cube drafting with 8 players, having 180 cards just undrafted, there's just going to be a lot of the most powerful stuff is not going to be in the packs. A lot of the less powerful stuff is going to be in the packs. That's always been something that's been a little bit unpleasant for me. There's cards that stand out in my mind that are like the weakest cards of all time to ever be in the digital powered cubes. But even then, I did used to play Powered Cube every time it was live on Magic Online. And that's not just when it was Holiday Cube. That's going back even 3, 4, 5 years when it started to be showing up at a higher clip. I want to say it's the pandemic that really caused the Magic Online team to really regularly offer the Vintage Cube. And when we started doing that, I was playing every run, often daily, sometimes way more than daily. And that has waned quite a lot in the last year or two for me. But the reason that I'm talking about the origins of Powered Cube and talking about the Holiday Cube and digital cubes from so many years ago is that the general philosophy, even if it's a little bit fraught, at least I believe it's a little bit fraught to power a 540 card cube and have so much of the cube going undrafted, the philosophy was still power maxing. You still had Time Vault in those early runs of the Holiday Cube. It eventually got cut kind of for power level / play pattern reasons. But even when that happened, it was kind of an exception. It was a power maxing cube. The idea wasn't that Vintage Cube had any aesthetic beyond playing with the most powerful cards. There's of course archetypes, but the archetypes, their reasons for being in the Vintage Cube is they were the most powerful archetypes. Yeah, you had mono red and mono white aggro, and then Boros, whatever. It's not like those are all timers, but they're things that are really approachable. More than that, Storm and Reanimator and blue control decks, blue having access to, Tinker, Ancestral Recall. Just the reason these cards were in the cube is that you could most consistently do the most powerful things, and that was the whole vibe. That was the whole idea. And once you're playing with Black Lotus, that always made sense to me. If you're going to play the most powerful cards, it just makes sense to me to power max. And this is, again, I feel like I'm going to say this too many times this week, but I just want to make sure that nobody is hearing judgment from me on how you like to play the game. That is what I always liked about the Holiday Cube. And for me, playing a cube that has Black Lotus that isn't power maxing really just feels off to me. I personally don't enjoy playing like old school cubes where you're using your Black Lotus to cast Shivan Dragon. I like looking at those cards. I like reading stories about those cards, maybe burning some people playing games, largely because I can walk away. Because that experience, it really just isn't for me. Once there's Black Lotus involved in the cube, I actually really enjoy the design and the development of these power maxing environments, where the question for me isn't what can I do when it's my turn to draft the Black Lotus. The question for me is what do I do when I'm playing against Black Lotus? How can I hedge to try to draft the most competitive deck, even when what my opponent is going to do is going to be completely bonkers? I have to be prepared to play against the most powerful cards, while also trying to leverage my position to play with the most powerful cards I have access to. So for me, I like Time Vault being a part of powered cubes. When it comes to my paper Vintage Cube and things I have played with in the space trying to make powered Tuberts work, Time Vault has always been part of the recipe, and for me, it has been an unquestioning part of the recipe. That's what I want to be there. I like the initiative. I like White Plume Adventurer. If you're going to give my opponent Black Lotus, then I want to be able to do something really powerful too. I want everybody at the table to present something deranged and obscene in the ceiling of the power level of the deck. I want to try to enable an environment where we can get the most broken stuff happening as possible. The way that I actually think about it, I think of that episode of The Simpsons where Mr. Burns goes in for the full medical scan and the doctors tell him that he is sick with every illness known to man. And because of that, he's just kind of fine. Like, that's what balance in a powered cube environment means to me. It makes a lot of sense to me to power max, but if you make your cube sick with Black Lotus and it has no other illnesses, then your cube is just sick with Black Lotus. And Black Lotus is sick. Now I'm using that word with two definitions. It's very cool. Black Lotus is very cool. But just adding Black Lotus to a cube that's not about that, I got Razor Swines in the brain. If I put Black Lotus in the Razor Swine tuber and somebody Black Lotuses out Razor Swine, that game sucks. And you do see things like that just in cubes sometimes. I used to spend some time just looking at random cubes on Cube Tutor, rest in peace Cube Tutor, and you would see a cube that was ostensibly just a regular cube, normal power band, nothing fancy going on, and then it just would have a soul ring in it. Or like there's some cards where I think that the power level is not fully appreciated. Like I think that you see Umezawa's Jite in a lot of cubes where it's clearly a colorless, massive power level outlier. And there's like a crowd that is advocating for Jite to be unbanned in modern. And I think a lot of it is that people just not played with that card. And it's difficult to get your head around if you weren't playing during Betrayers of Kamigawa Standard, just how miserable Umezawa's Jite is. And then you kind of have to see for yourself and get it out of your system. But just seeing cubes that have just like a small number of colorless power level outliers, which is really how I feel about those old school cubes where you have a bunch of dumpy cards and you just like ramp out a Shivan Dragon or a Sarah Angel ahead of schedule, and it's not that powerful, but then it doesn't feel like playing with Black Lotus. It's something that I don't enjoy as much. Really, when I think of Black Lotus, I think of Yawgmoth's Will. I want to try to do some kind of stuff that you can do in Vintage Constructed. That's where I want to be with Power Cube. So power maxing, the point I'm trying to make is that power maxing is what I've always liked. It was always made sense to me about playing with power in cube. And so when I see a cube has Black Lotus, I really am looking for most of the greatest villains in Magic's history. I want the cube to be sick with everything is my preference when it comes to powered cube. And that actually is why I've been resonating less with both the Magic Online and the Arena Cube powered offerings. Something in recent years that the Magic Online Vintage Cube has been doing, it's been cycling through what they call packages. They rotate archetypes in and out. And I'm not commenting on the balance and how these things play. And there's definitely a audience for the Magic Online Vintage Cube that really loves it. I imagine that they have been growing that crowd there. I know that people really enjoy seeing what's new in the Vintage Cube. But just for my preferences, and hopefully you follow along and don't hear this as a judgment, but it's just speaking to what I like about Powered Cube. In my mind, there's not 500 cards that are up to the level of playing against Black Lotus in all of Magic. I don't want to cycle through archetypes. That's not my preferred Powered Cube experience. I like diversity in Cube. I like the idea of them doing an unpowered cube that cycles through archetypes, and I also understand that there are people that are just excited to get this opportunity to play with Black Lotus. I think that's a lot of the draw for a lot of people to play the Magic Online Vintage Cube. It just doesn't speak to me as much because my personal vision is I want to be power maxing, and I don't want to cycle through archetypes. I want to follow a coherent vision from set to set and year to year and move the power max list towards the most optimally balanced version and the most fun version of something that is mostly power maxing. So cycling through the packages, that loses me for a number of reasons. And then Magic Arena has some other issues where there's just a lot of cards that aren't on it. The one that comes to mind, I'm not going to go over every card that's not on Magic Arena and why that would contribute to what I like more about Powered Cube being there. But the one that comes to mind is like Blightsteel Colossus isn't on Magic Arena. There's a number of restrictions in that environment that just kind of take me out of it a little bit. Tinkering for Blightsteel Colossus, in my mind, is just part of the Vintage Cube experience. I want to be power maxing, and one of the most powerful things you can do is tinker for Blightsteel Colossus, just in the entire history of Magic. And there's other powerful things you can do, like Bolus's Citadel will often convert to a win off of Tinker. You have some other things like the Phyrexian Portal, whatever that 9 mana portal, the Triple Edicts is called. That's powerful. But Blightsteel Colossus is just going to be part of the recipe for me. Definitely at 540 cards, but even if you're talking about a 360 card vintage cube, even if you want to distill it down to 180, if you want to build a powered Tubert, Blightsteel Colossus is going to be part of the recipe for me. So having a 540 card powered cube that doesn't feature Blightsteel Colossus, that takes me out of it a little bit based off of my preferences. And I'm not trying to really zoom in on Blightsteel Colossus, like a specific card, and saying that the cube is not for me or not fun or playable if it doesn't have a specific card. More what I'm thinking about is that it is strange the more cards that end up on the Arena client. At least it's hard for me to approach it mentally when you see the cards that still aren't on there. Like, it's weird to me that Modern Horizons 3 was just printed on Arena. Like that set is just on the client when Modern Constructed isn't on Arena. Like Modern Horizons and Modern Horizons 2 weren't on Arena. So there's definitely a long-term goal. You can't play Modern on Arena yet, is probably what I should say. I'm sure that the intention is at some point you will be able to play Modern Constructed on Arena. But the emissions do kind of get louder. It's kind of an uncanny valley thing. The closer the Arena powered cube gets to the Magic Online Vintage cube, the lists are very close. They definitely got closer as they added the Universes Beyond cards into the mix. Now you have your Troll of Khazad Doom and all that kind of stuff. And so it does make it louder for me as it gets closer that the cube isn't doing more to differentiate itself. It's more pronounced by what is missing. So the Blightsteel Colossuses do get louder as it does get closer. And I also find myself a bit nostalgic for the early days of Arena Cubes, when the client had many fewer cards, just a handful of sets were on there, but you still had a very playable, complete, and fun cube experience. I find myself really pining for the days where you could happily draft and play Charging Monstrosaur in the Arena Cube, just 5 mana, 5/5 trample haste, and that card was strong. Like, I trophied a lot of drafts with Charging Monstrosaur, and that was always really charming. I like that about Arena Cube. And it'll be cool when everything is finally on the client and the Arena powered cube can just be the same card pool as Magic Online. Though right now it's in kind of a weird space for me, is kind of the point I'm kind of getting across, given the history and given the proximity to different powered cubes that have the full card pool. Having 97% of it just makes these really strange blips kind of occur. Something that Magic Online does periodically is they run what they call the no holds barred vintage cube. And what that is, it's the idea is they power max. That is supposed to be vintage cube where it's just the most powerful experience possible. There are things that I like about that. I understand why they do it the way that they do it. They include some stuff that really just does not resonate with me. Specifically, the cards that come to mind are Gleemox and Namesticker Goblin, which are kind of like these digital only cards. And the idea is they're hamming it up. It's part of the spectacle. It's part of this is just the most powerful stuff going on. But it takes me out of it. It just kind of feels more like a gimmick at that point. I played a good amount of the first run of the No Rolls Barred Vintage Cube, and there's some fun stuff happening there. It just, yeah, the Gleemox thing, it doesn't really speak to what I like about Cube. It just kind of feels inorganic, and especially when the idea for me of playing with Black Lotus at all is I want to be power maxing. It just doesn't resonate with me to have the stuff that feels a little bit more gimmicky. I am more interested in the actual pursuit of real cards, and I like that you get to play with Time Vault. I like that you get to play with the Initiative. It's cool that they give a window to highlight that some of the time. But just the no holds barred, kind of the aesthetic that they run with, it loses me in some places there as well. To point to a time when the Magic Online Vintage Cube was really aligned with my vision for what I like about a powered cube, in 2022, when they did Supreme Draft, I actually was the trophy leader because I played just a deranged amount of Powered Cube. And what I liked about Supreme Draft, you're not familiar, what Supreme Draft is you open 18 just regular cube packs, 15 card packs, and you get two first picks from every pack and throw the rest in the trash. So you end up drafting 36 cards. And what I liked about Supreme Draft is it really distilled that top of the power band. You and or your opponent are often going to have Black Lotus. You're optimizing both for what you do with your best version of a Black Lotus deck or the best version of the cards you open if you don't get Black Lotus, and you're optimizing for what to do when your opponent has Black Lotus. And the experience of drafting Supreme Draft back then was really highlighting the strongest things in the cube. And something that a conversation around Vintage Cube in the most recent years, people talk about how Boros is so strong. And if you spend a lot of time in cube design, then you know that that's a structural issue. It's not that Guide of Souls is more powerful than Time Walk. It just isn't. It's not that a Johnny Nakatl Pariah or Fourth Earlingus are more powerful than Ancestral Recall. That's simply not true. There's just less friction to drafting a consistent, powerful, and coherent Boros deck than the contested lanes for the broken blue cards. And there's just way more Boros creatures with power and toughness, and the way that the digital cubes are curated, certainly the first run of the Arena Cube, I know that they have peeled back on this a bit, but there was just such low friction to having an effective Boros deck when there's just inherently much higher friction to drafting the most powerful cards on the cube. And what I liked about Supreme Draft there is all of the strongest stuff was on display. Boros was not playable. You had to be blue. It was basically impossible to be successful in those early runs of Supreme Draft without being blue. And it highlighted what the most powerful things were in the cube, and then the cards you could still get away with playing. And so sometimes you played like a small number of creatures with power and toughness because you needed a threat, and that would go along with your blue counter spells and card advantage cards. And you kind of got this glimpse of what the strongest things going on were, which everybody kind of knows. You know, it's Black Lotus, Time Walk, Ancestral Recall, Tinker, Urza's Saga, Library of Alexandria. But it did put some shine, specifically on Library of Alexandria. That's one that people pass a lot more than I think that they should, just given the power level, where people just don't think it's as strong as it is. And when you actually are playing with the top of the cube, if you were to curate a power maxing 360 card cube, Library of Alexandria is a pretty high pick in those environments because the card is just so categorically strong. There's going to be more friction to drafting those creatures with power and toughness Boros decks in a tighter list, which, you know, the 540 card aspect, that is something that contributes to the low friction to drafting Boros as well. But Supreme Draft really distilled what I enjoy about Powered Cube. And I specifically liked that it was just the regular cube list. One week you were playing a regular draft with the cube list, and then the next week the offering was Supreme Draft with the same cube list. And I know that this was not a very popular thing. A lot of people did not like Supreme Draft for a lot of reasons. And it does make sense to me, the most recent run of Supreme Draft on Magic Online, they curated a list specifically for Supreme Drafting. And the idea was it was a higher clip of cards that were reasonable to play. And it makes sense because what I'm saying I like about Supreme Draft is that a lot of the cards were unplayable. And then it really showed you which of the cards could actually hang. It highlighted the top of the power band. And that means that you are just passing and not seriously considering most of the cards in the cube. And that makes sense to me why you want to move away from that. It makes sense to me why it's not popular. But then what they did for Supreme Draft on the most recent run of Magic Online, they made it so more cards were playable, but a lot of the cards that you add to the environments to make that so are the things that I don't like about Constructed Magic. Specifically, the cards Chalice of the Void and Trinisphere. I play Cube, so I never have to see those cards. Like, those are two of my most hated cards in all of Magic. I am happiest when I forget that they exist. Anytime I show up to Modern, Legacy, or Vintage, and those cards are cast by my opponent, it's immediately a less fun experience for me. So power maxing in a way that really highlights playing with and against Black Lotus without getting into those undesirable aspects of prison decks and constructed is the sweet spot for me. That's what I look for when it comes to drafting Powered Cube, and that's why the recent digital offerings, I just have not been able to vibe with them as well. And there's just another card. I mean, I think that people who've been following my work for a long time maybe knew that this tangent was coming. But if you're talking about Time Vault being unfun and having undesirable play patterns, which I get, and it definitely makes sense at 540 cards. It's a clear standout on power level. It ends the game immediately. Like, I get why it's nobody's favorite thing to have around. But if we're pointing to cards that make the play experience worse, I hate that despite the package rotation, despite having Powered Cube on two different digital platforms now, it seems that for whatever reason, Hull Breacher has just become an accepted staple of these environments. And when you have just a number of cards that draw extra cards in your deck, when you're playing just a regular game and you cast a Ponder and your opponent responds with Hull Breacher, like, that's just a Chalice of the Void experience for me. That card is so not fun for me. And, like, my whole parameter is, like, you can play. It's fine if the cube has stuff that I hate. Like, there's going to be some cards that I don't like. That's fine. The cube is not optimized for my experience, and I'm not saying that it should be. It just sucks for me that I like the initiative and I am fine with having the strongest cards, and I like Time Vault. And those cards are put away in the only go for the gimmick high power. But then Hull Breacher, despite being printed in a fake set, being banned in the format that it was designed for, being underdeveloped, having no attention from competitive play design at all in its design, this is just something that is just like accepted as part of the Power Cube experience, and I hate that card. And seeing it in booster packs, seeing it in play, it makes me unhappy. I also cube to get away from Hull Breacher, so that is something that also makes me have less fun when it comes to the digital cube environments for the powered digital cubes. And I even like the combos. I think that usually when I say that I don't like Hull Breacher, people say, well, Hull Breacher plus Time Twister is sweet. And I agree. I think actually setting up that, having to put Time Twister in your deck, which can be to your detriment. Sometimes you cast Time Twister and you lose because your opponent draws the card first. I like that tension of playing draw sevens with a card that punishes your opponent when you execute on that. I don't like the way that Hull Breacher plays in regular games, and to me, the card is less fun than Time Vault. And everyone's preferences are different. I think that I am very much in the minority here, but this is my show. I'm just talking about what I like and why it doesn't work for me, not saying anybody else is wrong. And a lot of people say that I'm wrong, and that's fine. I don't need anybody to agree with me on this. It's just something that makes the experience less approachable for me. So when it comes to the Magic Online digital offerings, I think that just what has been popular, what a lot of people like, is just not the same as what I like. And that's fine. It's on me to not engage with that. And I will say for the thousandth time, I'm not saying this to disparage anybody or say that the cube should change. I'm the one that needs to change. That change is I'm not going to draft the Magic Online Powered Cube as much. And that's fine. I'll find time for other things, playing more of my own paper designs, which is paper is always better than digital anyway. Anytime you can actually get human beings together and play, Magic Online is just something that can scratch the itch a little bit until you get to do that. That's really what it is. Magic Online is fun to play leading up to a tournament, but the tournament itself is more fun. The cube gathering is way more fun than playing a computer game in isolation by yourself. Magic Arena, that's one, it's a little bit tougher for me where they just like don't have all the cards. There's more specific parameters for Magic Arena. They added the Universes Beyond. There was that weird stipulation in the first run. So the second and third runs, they've been closer to something that I would really enjoy. And Magic Arena is just kind of faster paced than Magic Online. So I think I'm more likely to spend some time playing the Magic Arena powered cube than the Magic Online Vintage cubes these days. But even there, I would love to live in a world where they allocated some more development hours, get those cards like Blightsteel Colossus that aren't on the client into the Arena powered cube, and add some more appeal to the non-Boros decks as a way to increase the friction of drafting Boros and I really don't like the idea of saying Guide of Souls is too strong in the Black Lotus cube, but I am sensitive to the fact that there are a lot of constraints to the Arena client and the fact that Boros did really overperform in that first run. I just would rather tackle that on volume, putting the appeal in some other places. I do not think that there's a real argument for Guide of Souls and Broadside Bombardiers being on the level of Time Vault. Like that's a bridge too far for me, but I hope to see that the course kind of corrected over time, and I do think expanding the card pool is an essential aspect of that. And I also want to give credit where it's due. I'm not sure how much is going to change things. I know it's not implemented right away, but they did announce that they are going to add another timeout when you start a game on the Magic Arena cube, on the powered cube. You'll start the game with one timeout instead of zero, which means you have more time for your rope to burn, which should alleviate some of the pressure of executing some of those really granular, click intensive combo decks, which is a cool direction to go. I'm glad to see that they are making some concessions to allow this format that really plays a lot differently than a lot of what else is going on in the client. So I know that they're going to keep working on it. Where it is right now, it's not something that I'm super excited to play, but it is something that I could see getting excited about in the future. And again, I'm not on here today to dump on it and say that it's awful and it's unplayable. I've just fallen out of step with it. And Powered Cube is something that I have a lot of experience and nostalgia and appreciation for over a long stretch of years. And I know that there's going to come a day where I get back into Powered Cube in a big way. And I think that the Arena Powered Cube, realistically, in a couple years, could be something that is really excellent. And now I do want to take some time owning up to the ways that my own inability to solve a problem is part of why I have fallen out of love with Powered Cube. I've published a couple different lists for 180 card Powered Cubes, be they 5-color environments or color restricted to Grixis. And I've also experimented. I used like bonus sheets to give players higher access to mana fixing to fit in some more of the infrastructure to make the draft more engaging, to try to make the 5-color powered cube work. And I just haven't been able to crack a 5-color powered cube using only 180 cards. And realistically, when I'm playing a powered cube in paper, I am most likely to be doing it with 2 or 4 players. That's just most of my cubing these days. That's kind of, an aspect of being in your 30s. It's harder to get 8 of your friends together. Schedules are just more difficult to line up. The logistics get difficult, and a powered cube is a tremendously expensive thing. So it's hard to have that exist for the 8-player draft that never happens. And just the 5-color Tubert with power, just the way that green is so much weaker when you have access to the colorless fast mana, just the way that with a small card pool, there's only a very small number of white cards that are very appealing, and you have to get all this mana fixing. You want fetches and ABU duels, and you want another cycle of fetchables. Surveillance are great, but you also want shock lands. There's just so much to try to cram in there, and there's just not that much space. And I'm not saying that it's this tremendous burden to have this puzzle. I'm just expressing that I have not been able to crack it. And I do have a Grixis powered Tubert up on my Cube Cobra. That's a fun way to play, but right now it's just weighing on me the way that I can't make White Plume Adventurer work at 180, and I can't make 5-color powered Tubert work the way that I want it to play where it's fully power maxed. And honestly, the solution I have in my mind, what I might do is make it like 270 cards. With 270, you draft a good chunk of the cube with 4, and you already aren't drafting the full cube when you play with 2. So 270 is a number where you can support up to 6, and it's reasonable to play with 4. Because like drafting 360 with 4, I know I've expressed that that's a suboptimal experience for me. And that's once again 180 full cards not being drafted at your high power environment. You're not going to see some of the cards, like if somebody has Black Lotus, but you don't even have a look at Time Walk, it makes the games less competitive, or at least the matchups in aggregate Like, if you put Black Lotus on one side and Time Walk on the other, a lot of the games will be non games, but both players will have a puncher's chance at winning, and that's what I'm always chasing when it comes to Powered Cube. I'm not trying to make the best games possible. If I was doing that, I wouldn't put Soul Ring in the cube. Like, Powered Cube, I do care about the balance, but the balance means both players have the shot at doing something ridiculous and winning the game without their opponent being able to do much about it. So a powered tubert is really kind of one of the more common questions I get. People are looking for a powered list at 180. People love playing with Black Lotus, and it makes sense. There's a real mythos to power. There's a lot of reason that the Magic Online Vintage Cube is the most known, the most drafted cube that exists. People like playing it. And that makes sense. It's just something that I've fallen a bit out of step with. And when it comes to a powered tubert, I just have not been able to crack it yet in the way that would be most satisfying for me. But I do think that 270, that's the idea that I have in my mind. I'm going to keep thinking on it. Maybe I'll put that together and figure that list out. I think that that's the lowest friction. I think that if I actually sit down and I want to make a 240 card powered tubert, it will not be difficult to come up with one that is satisfying. My brain still is chewing on 180. I really want to make it 180 cards because 240 is not a tubert, but it could play up to 6, and there is something to that. And you can play Star Magic when you have more cards than 180. So that's something to think about too. But my brain's going to keep chewing on it. Right now, I'm at a point where I'm just not that excited to play with power relative to other cubes that are available to me, relative to other projects that I have been working on. But you never know when inspiration is going to strike. You never know when I might just become more interested. The Arena Cube, the easy access to it is something I could see getting more excited about. It's going to be around more and more. We're already on the third run in as many months, so there's going to be more opportunities for Arena Cube, and I could see myself really enjoying that in the future. And I could also see myself getting back into the vintage powered cube. There's no reason that I wouldn't. It's just that right now I'm a bit out of step with it. So I did want to just take the opportunity today, just kind of lay out where I'm at with Powered Cube. And it's not to, again, say that anybody's doing things right or wrong, that what I like is better, because that's not the case. I just want to share kind of my thoughts on Powered Cube because it's something that I'm asked about. And so it just made sense to me to talk about this very popular, the most popular way to cube on my Cube podcast. I don't want it to be unacknowledged. I don't want to say anything. Hopefully, this didn't come off as overly negative. I didn't want to sound as judgmental today. That was absolutely not my intention. I hope nobody took it that way. I'm just saying what I like, where I'm at, and why Powered Cube is not where I'm at today. Though it may be, again, in the future. It's something that I have loved for a long time. I'm sure that I will come back to it. But thank you so much for listening today. I hope that my ramblings were enjoyable, maybe gave you something to think about. Maybe you disagree with me completely, and that is totally fine. There is room for all kinds of opinions in this space, and again, I know that I am in the minority here. But thanks for listening. Appreciate you taking the time to like, comment, review, share, subscribe, anything you do to support the podcast. If you haven't gotten your tickets for Shoebox, go to shoebox.gg. That's next month, March 13th through the 15th at the St. Paul River Center. I'll be there. I'll be Cuban. I'll see you there. And I'll see you next week here on the podcast. I'll be back next week talking more Cube. Later, gamers.